Welcome to CIS 288W, and we're going to be talking about Windows Network Administration in this class. This is our Module 1 lecture and video, so don't let the lecture part scare you. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about different things that are going to be going on in this module, but during this presentation we're going to be talking about things that give you hints towards the quizzes. So by watching this video you'll save a lot of time and effort by taking your quiz. The second half of this video is going to be a little different. You have a lab, of course, that you're going to be working with, and in this lab sometimes things can get pretty confusing if you're not that familiar with working with servers and some of the advanced topics that we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to walk you through in each module the labs themselves, so that should answer a lot of questions and help you tremendously from trying to stumble through the labs on your own with things you've never done before. So each of the modules are going to work that way, and let's go ahead and get started by looking at our objectives. So in this particular module we're going to talk about Windows Server 2012 and the different editions that are out there. We're going to be talking about planning, installing the server, as well as identifying what's going on in your existing network, different types of installations, some licensing information, and baseline requirements. So let's go ahead and get started there. So Windows Server 2012 is only available on 64-bit hardware. Now 2008 had a 32-bit and a 64-bit, but 2012 has only 64-bit. So you've got to have 64-bit computer for this class, and it has to have virtualization turned on in the BIOS, which is usually a fairly easy thing to do if you just boot into the BIOS. So the first version that Microsoft came out with in 2012 is called Foundation. It's for very small companies. It has limited features available only from the manufacturers themselves. It comes pre-installed with the software, the operating system on it. It supports only one physical processor and up to 15 users, so that's a pretty small office. It has one physical environment and does not support virtual machines on a physical environment. So basically, if you have a server, it doesn't support any virtual machines to be installed onto it. 2012 Essentials is the next step up. It's not that much of a step up, though, because it only supports 25 users or less. And it does not support virtual machines either, so as you can see down here. It also has limited features, so it doesn't have every single feature, very similar to the Foundation. But it supports two physical processors, so you can definitely get a lot more speed out of the Essentials version if you have more users. So 2012 Standard. This is really interesting because 2012 Standard is really what 2008 Enterprise was. They got rid of the Enterprise version in 2012, and so now the Standard version has all the features of both Standard and Enterprise from the 2008 version. And it supports up to 64 physical processors, as many cores as you want, of course, but physical processors, but nobody's going to have that many anyway. One physical environment will support up to 2 virtual machines. So what that means is that you get 2 free virtual machine licenses with every one physical server license. Now that doesn't mean that it will only support 2 virtual machines. You can put as many virtual machines as you have resources, but it comes with 2 free ones when you buy the one. Client access licenses are required for every user or device accessing the server. So that means these CALs, you have to buy one for everybody in your office that accesses the server. And that is your first quiz alert. That will be something that will be on the quiz. All right, 2012 Data Center. This is just like 2012 Standard. There's really no difference in features. It has all the features on it on both versions. They both support 64 physical processors. They both have client access licenses. With Data Center, you have to buy an additional Data Center license for every 2 physical processors that you have. The difference between Data Center and Standard is, if you remember when I said that you get 2 free virtual machine licenses on Standard, you actually get unlimited virtual machines on data center. So as many as you want to put on there, as much as you have resources for, that is what you can put on data center. And that's really the big difference between the two. All right, when you install Windows Server 2012, you've got a couple of different phases. You've got the pilot phase. You deploy and test a small group of servers. This would be in a larger type of office. You don't want to introduce a new operating system into a large office without having sort of a sandbox testing area. And then once you feel good about the pilot phase, then you can go ahead and do the rollout phase where you actually install in a production environment. So you want to schedule adequate downtime and allow for ongoing minor interruptions. So you just want to make sure that you notify the department heads that you're about to do this before you do it. You got to take a look at your existing network. Can it handle Server 2012? So it's going to require determining a baseline for network and system hardware, software installation and configuration, and all these other things. So network topology, you want to document the systems and devices on your network. You've got to look at your speeds, your wide area connections, if you have any connections between you and other offices. Sometimes people use VPN tunnels between the servers, and you want to make sure that you have enough bandwidth for that kind of thing. You've got devices, routers, switches, servers, and clients, and then all forms of IP addressing. Server 2012 doesn't have any new IP addressing requirements from 2008. The 2012 version has both IP4 and IPv6 turned on and ready to go by default. So when you're analyzing the existing network, how many physical locations does the organization have? You don't want to just include other satellite locations, but also are people VPNing in from home as well? Then you've got traffic patterns such as monitoring network traffic. You can provide insights into current performance, help to identify potential bottlenecks and things like that. You always have to look at these things before you introduce this or anything else new into your network. So you can make your server a domain controller. It doesn't have to be, but you have to have at least one domain controller on your network. Active Directory domain controller is the most important server on your network. It holds all of the usernames, the passwords, the entire structure of Active Directory. And of course, on every domain controller, you have to have at least one DNS server. DNS is how you resolve names to IP addresses. So if you're looking for a server, by name, then you need a DNS server to resolve that name to the IP address in order to translate that so you can get access to it. And then, of course, DHCP for having everybody else automatically get an IP address. We're going to do that in our lab. So everybody has to have either a static IP or an automatic IP. And if you have it set to automatic, you have to have a DHCP server to hand out those automatic addresses. So you'll get experience with that. WINS. WINS is a legacy type of technology. We're not going to use it in this class. However, you may work at an office that uses Windows 2000 or older computers, and those are going to work better with WINS than they do with DNS, because that's just the way they were designed. So WINS is also a name to IP address type of resolution. It's just for older types of computers. It's not nearly as important as DNS is. So planning for day-to-day operations. Most critical procedures for day-to-day operations involve the following activities. So this is definitely a quiz alert. You should be aware of this. Monitoring and analysis, resources, change control. Change control is a big one. You definitely have to go, when you go to make a change, you've got to notify the people in your office you're about to make a change so they can be prepared for some sort of an issue, an outage. Problem escalation procedures. This is really important as well. When somebody low end gets word of a problem, when do you actually escalate that to the higher levels of technicians and engineers? Of course, backup and recovery, and then after something's done, you want to make sure that you document it. And you also want to have a way of auditing what happens on your network as well. To install Windows Server 2012, you can boot from the Windows distribution media, or of course you can use an ISO file that you download like we're going to do in this class on VMware. You run the setup within your current Windows operating system, perform a command line installation, and of course there's automated installation. So this is another quiz alert. Be aware of these different options for installing Windows Server 2012. So you've got a couple of approaches for setting up the server. You've got interactive and you've got automated. So the interactive is the way we're going to be doing it, where you just boot from the ISO file or the DVD, and then you walk through step by step of answering all the different questions. That's interactive. The automated process is an unattended installation. You create an answer file that says things like, here's the name of the server, here's the domain it's going to join, here's the IP address of the server, and here are the different roles and features you're going to add into it. It takes a little bit more skill and planning to do that, but you can roll out a lot of servers at once. Licensing, server licenses and client access licenses. Each installation on a computer requires the appropriate server licensing. So we talked about client access licenses before. Everybody who accesses the server has to have a client access license. But the server itself has to have a license. And so when you buy a copy of the software, that is the server license. And you can choose how many CALs you want to go with that. With standard and data center editions, your choices are as follows. Of course, you have per server, as I just mentioned. 1 CAL is required for each concurrent connection to the server. This usually means 1 CAL for every connection to that server. And then you have per device or per user. Now, they've pretty much gotten rid of the per device. When 2012 first came out, you had this option, but now you buy everything by per user. So you might run into some legacy per device CALs, however. But per user means that the user can log into any computer in the organization. Whereas per device is how many devices you actually have on the network. And that was typically a less expensive license. So Microsoft has gotten rid of per device for the most part. There's still a couple of different kind of licenses you can buy for per device, but most of them are all per user now. And per user gives you much more flexibility anyway, because if your computer dies, you can throw that thing out, or I'm sorry, recycle it, and get another computer and log into that one, and your per user license allows you to do that. All right, so you've got to have some baseline requirements. So you need to have at least 1.4 gigahertz, and this is a quiz alert. 1.4 gigahertz, 64-bit CPU. You've got to have at least 512 megabytes of RAM and at least 32 gigs of hard drive space. Now, there's a difference between the minimum requirements and the recommended requirements. This will make Windows run, but it won't necessarily run very well if you have the minimum requirements. So you have some installation options, such as a clean installation, where you have a blank hard drive. You have an upgrade option if you're upgrading from 2008. Of course, you have to be at least 64-bit 2008 to get that to work. 32-bit will not work. You cannot upgrade 32 to 64-bit. Set up program transitions the older OS to the new OS using a phased approach. The new OS is installed side by side with the old OS, allows rollbacks if necessary. It does not retain any user or system settings or knowledge of any installed applications. That's if you do the clean installation. All right, so you must configure everything. I'll use a clean installation when the current OS to be upgraded. A standard configuration is required and no operating system is currently installed. So that's when you should do a clean OS installation. So you've got a few different ways of installing 2012, and this is another quiz alert. You've got your full server installation, which is what we're doing for this class. You've got the server core, which basically comes up with a command prompt, and you do everything by command line. And you've got this other oddball one, minimal server interface, the full server installations with the server graphical shell removed. It's not available. It's not an option when you go to install Windows Server 2012. It's something that you can do later. So this would be on a very low-end server that maybe doesn't run well with the graphical installation or even the core installation. This is even lower than the core installation. But you can't get it during the installation of the operating system. You have to do it after the operating system is installed. Active Directory installation options and issues. Use the Add Roles and Feature Wizard in Server Manager to add Active Directory. So if you recall from your 279 class, in 2012, you don't use DC Promo anymore to promote the server to be a domain controller. You go to the Add Roles and Features and add the Active Directory Domain Services role, which I will do in the demo of the module. This installs all the Active Directory services, binaries, and everything else you need to make it a domain controller. But you still have to choose promote this server to a domain controller when it's over. All right, so we covered the different versions of Windows Server 2012 and things like that, installation, activation, baseline, all that good stuff. So now let's get on to the lab. So we've got our Module 1 lab, and don't use any other virtual machines from any other class. So you're going to take on the role as a junior network administrator just like you did in 279. And once again, we're going to be the Widget LLC Corporation. And we're going to pretend that you are the administrator that's going to be setting up 2 servers and a client machine. So our first server is going to retain the name it did from the previous class, DC01. And our other server is going to be called Router01, which we're going to do some really cool things. And then the virtual machine client is we're just going to call it client. Now you can run any one of these operating systems. It has to be at least Windows 7, 8, 8.1, or 10, anything you want. Yes, you can even use version 10 if you want. You might run into some more problems because it's still a little buggy, but you can certainly do that. So we're going to, when you create the virtual machine, of course, you have to give it a name. And your first one is going to be DC01. Now you have to give it at least 1 gigabyte or 1024 megabytes of memory. That's the RAM, and at least 40 gigs for the partition size. So if you want, you can give it more than 1 gigabyte of RAM. Of course, it'll run faster if you do. You don't need any more than 40 gigabytes of space. But if you want, you can give it more than 1. But you have to check to see if you have enough RAM available on your host computer in order to do that. So you got to go to your task manager and go to performance and then take a look at your memory. And I have 8 gigs on here, so I need at least 1 gig to run my host operating system. So I can use 7 gigs for my virtual machines if I want to. All right, so we're going to start Vmware Player or Workstation, whichever one you have. And you'll want to have that pre-installed for this. And we're going to call the first server, that 2012 server, called DC01. And here are the IP address settings for that. There's your 192.168.0.5, your subnet mask, gateway, and DNS server is going to point back to itself because it's going to be a DNS server itself. And you're going to give me a screenshot of the system properties of DC01. So you just right-click on Computer, go to Properties, and that is your system properties right there. You can also go to Control Panel and double-click on the system icon. So then we're going to promote DC01 to be a domain controller. So I've got my DC01 already ready to go. I've just installed it. And we're going to use the password, the capital P, and a 0 for the O. So a lot of people try to use their own passwords for this. They forget, and then they have to start all over again. So just letting you know, it's a good idea to make it all the same password. Just use the word password, and you'll be good to go. All right, it's prompting us to install the tools. So we can do that if we want. I'm actually going to do it a little bit later. It's not something we need right this minute. Also, if you want to increase your picture size, you can right-click anywhere on the screen, go to Screen Resolution, and you can change the default here, something higher up. I'll just go up to there, click Apply. If you don't like it, you can always change it. And we'll see if we like and that looks much better. It's a little bigger, so we're going to keep that. All right, so since our first thing we're going to be doing is naming the server and making it a domain controller and then assigning all the IP information. So we're going to start by going to the system properties, changing the name to DC01, then we're going to set up the IPs. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to Control Panel, System, and this is going to be your screenshot. And then you go into the change settings under there and choose computer name, change, and then change to DC01, which I did earlier. But now we're set to a work group, and we're going to want to make this an Active Directory domain controller. So the next thing we got to do is make sure that we have the IP address set properly. So let's right-click on that, go to Properties. You can always pause, go back. If I'm going too fast, just pause, go back, and watch it again. This is all stuff you've done in previous classes, which is why I'm racing through it. All right, that's it. Those are the settings. Freeze that frame if you want, and then do it on your computer. Okay, you should not have access to the internet at this time, so don't worry about that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go to Server Manager, and we're going to add roles and features. This is nothing new for you. This is something you've done in the 279 class. Of course, if you did it in the 2008 version, then it's a little bit different, but that's okay. So Active Directory Domain Services. Go ahead and check that box. It asks if you want to add the features. That's fine. Click Next. These are the features. Just leave that the way it is. Click Next. Click Next. And Install. And this usually takes a couple of minutes. I'll fast forward. So once this is installed, then we're going to want to go to number 12 here and go to under Active Directory Domain Services, promote this server to be a domain controller. So once this all installs, you have to take the next step. It doesn't happen automatically. So then you will want to call this widget llc.internal. So in the real world, make sure you don't do anything other than internal or .local, because everything else, some people like to use .ad, some people use to like .com. You don't want to do that because those are public domain names, and if you don't own that domain name, it causes all kinds of problems when you go to get a certificate. It'll say, hey, you don't own this domain name, so we're not going to give you a public certificate. It also causes problems as well if you've got a .com internally and you've got a .com externally, then you're going to have a hard time getting to that web page without making some DNS changes. All right, looks like that is good. It's all finished up, so let's go ahead and click Close. And now you see this little triangle that is underneath this flag. You click on that, and you see the option, hey, go ahead and promote this server to be a domain controller. So let's go ahead and do it. So now a wizard comes up, and this looks very similar to the 2008 part. So if you've done that in an older class, then it'll be fine. So we're going to add a domain controller to an existing domain. No, we're not doing that. We're creating a brand new forest. So let's go ahead and call it widget llc.internal. And now we're just going to go step by step until the end, and then we'll fast forward again. Some of you may see a bit of a delay before you get to the next screen. Don't worry about it. Depends on the speed of your computer. It might take a short amount of time, it might take a long time. Leave the functional level at 2012 R2. So that's fine. This other part's all grayed out. That's okay, except for the password. The password is for the directory services restore mode in case you have to boot into recovery mode to recover from some sort of a problem. So you want to use the exact same password, which is password with a capital P and a 0 for the O. All right, click Next. And just ignore the delegation warning. And now it's verifying the NetBIOS information. And our NetBIOS name is widget LLC. If we want, we can change that, but we're not going to. This is sort of a leftover legacy type of thing, but you need it in order to log into your server. Okay, this information is just, hey, this is where the Active Directory logs and things are going to go. That's fine. Scroll down, make sure there's no major problems there. That looks good. And now it's going to give you a bunch of triangle warnings, but as long as you don't get any red stop errors, then you should be able to continue on with the installation. Okay, very good. We have a bunch of warnings, which I don't really care about, so we'll just go ahead and click Install. Like I said, you just don't want to have any red stoppage ones. And this, again, may take several minutes. It may take even longer if you have an older, slower computer. So I'll go ahead and fast forward. All right, you may get this message about that you're going to be restarting. So go ahead and click Close on that. Click Close on that. And we're going to close the Server Manager. It's going to restart on its own. And when we're back up, we'll be able to continue on. If your mouse gets locked, by the way, just hit Control-Alt, and then that'll free it up. All right, now that we're back in, let's just go ahead and click on the little three-fingered salute at the top. And you'll see we're logging in now as widget LLC /administrator. That's that NetBIOS name you saw earlier. And use your password to log in. So it doesn't look that much different than it did before. However, you now have some new options that you didn't see before, such as Active Directory, users and computers, and other Active Directory services, just like you had in the 279 class. So let's click on the Tools menu, and you can see there's all the Active Directory stuff. So looking good. All right, so now what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to install those the VMware Tools because we're going to be doing some copying and pasting, which you're going to need the tools to do. So after I went to the player at the top and then I chose manage and then add VMware Tools, you see this shows up as a DVD down here. So double click on the DVD and you'll have to run through the installation real quick, restart, and then you'll be ready to go again. All right, we are booted back in after installing the tools and now we're ready to move back on. So let's take a look at our lab. All right, so the next step is going to be to import the Active Directory objects. And so we're going to need to run this command, but first we have to download the file. So let's go ahead and go back to our course, and you see there's a file in here called All Good. And basically this has a whole bunch of different Active Directory users, computers, groups, all those different things in it. And we're going to import it so we don't have to individually create all these different things. So just go ahead and click on All Good, and then it'll download it to your download location. That could be anywhere. You just have to take a look and search under where your downloads are. By default, they're in the My Documents Downloads folder. And then what we're going to do is we're going to paste that in. So there's my All Good file. Because my download location is my desktop. And then we're going to copy it. And then we're going to paste it. So now we've got an All Good file. All right, as you can see, the All Good file looks with the white paper. That's fine. It doesn't bother anything. So let's go ahead and open up Windows Explorer. Double click on the C drive, and then let's just move it, right click, drag over, and move it to the root of the C drive. Now we're going to right click on our start button here and choose command prompt admin. And now we're going to run our command. So let's go back to our course here. There's our lab. Let's copy our command and paste it in. Okay, so you see that the allgood.csv file is in the root of the C drive where we just moved it, and there's the command with all the switches that we want. All right, so just hit enter. Boom, it's done. All right, hopefully you got those same results. If not, walk through this video slower and make sure you put everything in the right place. So let's go back to our tools and Active Directory users and computers, and we'll see what changed. And take a look. Whoa, look at that. We have all these new organizational units. We have marketing. We have information technology. So all that happened just when we imported that file. Okay, so let's go on to the next step. We need to configure the next server, which is router 01. So we're all done with DC01 for now, so you can go ahead and shut it down if you want. Or, I'm sorry, don't shut it down. We need it for this next part, but you don't have to use it. Just leave it running so it's got Active Directory on there. So I've already created router 01, but I haven't configured it yet. So let's log in for our first time. I've already created the password as our password that we're using. And I'm adjusting the video here so it's a little bigger. There we go. That looks good. And I've already named it router 01 as well. Going to go ahead and change the IP address to be what it says in the lab. Sometimes you got to hit the numlock. No gateway. All right, and again, this will not have access to the internet initially. One of our labs is we will be making changes to that. I've already named the server router 01, but if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and do that now. Don't worry about activating the product because the class won't last as long as the demo period, so you don't have to worry about that. So you'll be taking a screenshot of the client's system properties as well. And when we get onto the client server, and then of course do the router 01 system properties. So we're going to go ahead and do the client one next. We're all done with router 01. So here's the settings for the client. We're going to make it .75 for our host IP. And subnet mask, gateway, DNS, all that same information there. And the only thing different we're going to do is we're going to join this guy to our domain. All right, one thing I did forget to do on the router 01, I forget to tell you about anyway, is to not join router 01 to the domain. We're actually going to be doing something a little different with router 01 than we're going to be doing with the client part. So router 01, exactly as I showed you, is fine. Don't join it to the domain, but your client computer, absolutely, that's what we're going to do here. All right, so we have a Windows 8 computer. Again, you could use Windows 7, 8, 8.1, or 10. Doesn't matter. And from here, we're going to set up the IP address just like we did on the other two. And then we're going to join it to the domain. Make sure that you have the gateway on this one. And the IP address for the DNS should be for our DC01. All right, so to join our computer to the domain, it's very simple. You've done it in previous classes, but this is just a refresher at this point. Click on the system icon, and then we're going to go to change settings. And we're going to go ahead and go to the computer name, change, and go to the domain. All right, now sometimes you end up getting an error message saying it can't find the domain, so you have to do some troubleshooting steps. So here we actually have that happen right here. So let's take a look and see what could cause that the domain could not be contacted. In this particular case, it's because we changed the IP address from the default to a specific internal subnet, and VMware just doesn't like that. So what you got to do is go up to where it says Player, go to Manage, and then Virtual Machine Settings. And from here, click on the Network Adapter, and we're going to change this from NAT to LAN segment. Hit the drop down, go to LAN segment 1, click OK. Now we'll go to DC01 and do the same thing. Player, Manage, Virtual Machine Settings, NAT, change it to LAN segment 1. And do the same thing on router 01 if that's still running. Otherwise, do it next time you reboot. Now let's go back to our other server, and now let's see if we can ping DC01. So let's ping by IP address 121.68.0.5. Oh, we can ping it now. Let's see if we can ping it by name as well. Ping DC01. Hey, there it is. It's pinging by IP version 6 there, which is fine. If you hit the up arrow and hit -4, then you'll get the version 4, the one you recognize. All right, so let's click OK. So now we know we can resolve, and we should get our prompt. Yay, we got our prompt. So go ahead and put in administrator and the same password. And it should say welcome to the domain. And there it is. And of course, you'll have to reboot after you do that. So let's go ahead and restart. So while we were waiting, don't forget to take a screenshot of the system properties. Again, just go to Control Panel, System, or right-click on Computer and go to Properties. Either one of those will get you to the same place. Click on the system properties. It shows basically that you've got the name and it's joined to the domain. And then we're going to do one more thing in this lab, and that is we are going to, for the client anyway, we're going to go to Active Directory. We're going to move the client computer to the Information Technology Organizational Unit. So once that reboots, we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so the client computer's restarted. It's joined to the domain. It should be in under the computers OU, which it is. Hey, there it is. There's client, so it's nicely joined to our domain. So what we want to do is we want to move it to the information technology OU. So there's a couple ways we can do that. One way is we can just left click and just drag it over and let go. The other way is we can right click and choose move. They both do the exact same thing. That one just has more steps than the other. Click OK. And now we go into Information Technology OU, and there we see our client computer. And of course, you want to get a screenshot of that client computer showing up in the Information Technology OU. So there's a couple more pieces. You've got the lab reflection and the knowledge adaptation, and just use your module reading, or you can also use the internet to do some searching on what all these different things mean. Tell me if you had any issues in this lab and what you do to fix it. Also, what does the CSVDE command do, and explained in more detail what those parameters are. Remember, we did the I, K, and the F. Tell me what those parameters are. Then we also give you a scenario here, explain why you won't be upgrading to Server 2012 Enterprise. During the beginning of this video, I actually answered that question as I went through the different versions. So that concludes Module 1 of our 288 class, and let's get this done and prepare for Module 2.